Okay. Check 1, check 2, check 3, check 4. We microphone check and then we check some more. Yeah. Welcome. Hope everybody's having a good week. Man, if you want to wake up before a stream, try burning your lips on some hot tea right before you hit play. But yeah, we are in here. We're going to talk a lot of boxing. There's a lot to discuss. We're obviously going to spend a good portion of the time talking Riyadh season aftermath. We'll talk a little bit about the fights. I didn't actually publish a recap on this one, and there's a reason why, which I'm going to get into. But we're going to talk some. Yes, Benji Tucker in the house. Let's get it. Yeah, tons to discuss. We're going to talk Riyadh season. We're going to discuss some Virgil Ortiz versus Bohachuk. That's the fight that's taking place this Saturday. You know, there's also Luis Alberto Lopez versus Angelo Leo. That one's kind of floating under the radar because we're coming off of such a big event in with Riyadh season, and you know the idea that Virgil Ortiz is having a big we could call this a big step up, right? At least at 154, he's had 2 fights, a total of 2 rounds at 154. So yeah, Bohachuk coming off of that beat down over Brian Mendoza. This is a big deal for Virgil. So yeah, the fight that's going under the radar is Luis Alberto Lopez making his 4th title defense, this time against Angelo Leo. We're also going to talk a little bit about Canelo Alvarez, not only the disappointment in him, you know, predictably picking Edgar Berlanga, but the recent back and forth to the press or on social media between Canelo Alvarez and Turki Al-Sheikh is getting a little bit spicy. You know what I mean? I wasn't expecting Turki to jump in the fray in the, you know, kind of shading your opposition on social media. Like and we're going to talk about whether we would consider Turki Al-Sheikh a promoter at this point, just a promoter with much deeper pockets than all other promoters, because he is already changing the sport right now. It's no secret, you know, reports came out that he lost that the event lost $10 million last weekend. It doesn't take an accountant or a CPA to tell you that these Riyadh season events aren't directly turning a profit. With the amount that they're paying these fighters per fight, and then the amount that people are paying to enter and the amount of pay-per-views that it's generating, yeah, of course, this is a non-profitable event. These all are. Ngannou versus Fury, Joshua versus Ngannou, you name it. And I'm sure that, you know, Beterbiev versus Dimitri Bivol is going to be non-profitable as well. But I don't think that that's the point right now. I think that, you know, it has a lot to do with promoting Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I mean, you know, I went to Crawford versus Madrimov near Exposition Park in LA, and you know, every time there was a moment for somebody to get on the mic and for the DJ to promote Riyadh season and Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, that's what was going on. Like the first thing that I was handed when I got into the venue was a brochure basically that was talking about the event and was talking about future boxing events. But it was, you know, it was geared towards making Riyadh, Saudi Arabia a main or a major global tourist, you know, attraction. So, you know, this boxing that Turki Al-Sheikh's been promoting, I look at this as being more a marketing tool. And that's not to say that Turki Al-Sheikh isn't a boxing fan. He clearly is. But the point isn't to immediately start turning some coin and start, you know, getting out of the red and into the black profit wise. Like they don't need this boxing money is the impression that I'm getting. Yeah, you're right. Turkey is breaking down the wall and kind of demystifying a lot of what's going on. So, you know, to get to the point, he called out Canelo Alvarez because Canelo basically suggested that he does respect Turki Al-Sheikh, but doesn't like how he's conducting business. And so Turki Al-Sheikh, he kind of ripped Canelo. I don't think it would be a stretch to say that, saying we all know that after you lost to Bivol, you have been wanting to take easy fights. And so let me conduct my business and put on the great fights that people want to see. Let you keep on picking easy touches and easy opponents and conduct your career that way. I read that and I was like, damn, like at this point, Turki has kind of expressed the fights that he wants, but he hasn't gotten in the mud and actually started, trash talking other fighters, let alone the biggest fighter in boxing, Canelo Alvarez. So I was of mixed, opinion in reading that. On one hand, he was right. He was right in terms of Canelo's choice of opponent. Like you look at his last 4 opponents, it's been who? John Ryder. Well, first, let's start with the Triple G3, right? Which was already, Canelo was going to win that fight. And I think that the vast majority of us thought that. Triple G, John Ryder, Jermell Charlo, Jaime Munguia, now Edgar Berlanga. It's not a schedule that really inspires, right? But on the other hand, I was thinking like, is that Turki Al-Sheik's place to weigh in that way and to down talk, again, the biggest star in the sport, even if he is right? Is it as simple as if you've got the money, then you could say and do what you want, even in the boxing space? Because, I mean, whatever Turki Al-Sheik wants to do right now in the boxing space, I think that he's got the ability with his financial backing to be able to do that. Like if he wanted to abolish sanctioning bodies, yes, they would kind of survive like roaches, but I think that they would become more niche products, and they would have their own little circuits where maybe the WBC is able to operate with this little group of fighters, the WBA, the same thing. But if Turki Al-Sheik, for instance, wanted to get with like Ring Magazine and say the ring belt is going to be the official belt and there's only going to be one per division, he's got enough money to put behind that movement where that would then be the way that it goes in boxing. So when you've got everybody from the promoters, the other promoters, I'm talking, Matchroom Eddie Hearn, Bob Arum, whoever, Golden Boy, whoever wants to work with Al-Sheik, Frank Warren and Queensberry, when you've got the promoters eating out of your hands and you've got the sanctioning bodies eating out of your hands, and now many of the top fighters eating out of your hand, you really kind of have carte blanche to weigh in any capacity that you want, whether we boxing purists like it or not. That's kind of how I see this going down. But he wasn't wrong in the way that he criticized Canelo. Pablo B's in the house. Thank you for coming through. Yeah, if Canelo's holding the belts hostage, then, and it's clear that that Turki Al-Sheik is looking to consolidate the titles, then you're kind of killing two birds with one stone in chastising. Basically, he's taking the step that Mauricio Suleiman won't take. Suleiman and the head of the WBC never mandated that Canelo fight David Benavidez, yet he's putting Benavidez on a timetable like, hey, make your decision. Are you going to challenge? Are you going to stick to being not even the mandatory, but the #1 contender at 168, or are you going to do light heavyweight? Pick a lane. So he's basically forcing Benavidez to pick a lane, but isn't making anybody a mandatory challenger for Canelo's belt, which enables Canelo to just fight the Edgar Berlangas of the world. You know what I mean? So yeah, so we're going to get into a little bit of that. And yes, I was, predictably disappointed when Canelo announced that Berlanga is going to be the guy. And now we've got to sit through a whole press tour where they're kind of awkwardly answering questions about, David Benavidez, or, hey, nobody really wants to see Canelo fight Berlanga. What do you think about that, Berlanga? You know what I mean? And in his Puerto Rican, New York way, he's going to answer that question, with the edge that he, with the chip on his shoulder that he's been carrying himself with since he became an overnight boxing celebrity, not totally a crossover celebrity, but he was in the top 10 percentile in famous fighters for a moment when he had that, first 16 fights knocking the opponent out in the first round. Like that enabled him to be able to, go the distance in his next 6 fights and still be in line to fight Canelo. Because when you've got like the Fat Joes and Snoop Dogg and Lil Wayne kind of backing you and talking about how nice you are, yeah, you are able to kind of jump the line. You don't have to fight the fringe contenders and the ranked, 11 through 15 guys of the division, because we saw Edgar Berlanga bypass all of that. He didn't fight Christian Mabili, Jaime Munguia, Jesse Hart, even Demetrius Andrade. He didn't fight any of these guys to earn this shot. So it's really a tough sell. And we hear how Canelo's trying to spin it, but it's almost an insult to the boxing community's intelligence when you hear how much he contradicts what he just said about not fighting this guy for this reason, but then you're fighting Edgar Berlanga as if he actually earned that title shot. So look, I don't want to just on the surface hate on the guy's opportunity, but let's not act like this is any sort of a merit-based system. It is simply eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Whatever Canelo says goes. You know what I mean? That's it. Sal's in the house. Thank you for coming through. Yeah, Plant versus Macumbi. That's going to be pretty interesting. That's on the undercard. If Caleb Plant is still Caleb Plant, he should be able to handle business there. But, I would have much rather see maybe Caleb Plant coming off the loss, that really tough loss to David Benavidez. I wouldn't mind seeing him against Edgar Berlanga. That would be the type of fight that would, give Berlanga a lot of the respect that he doesn't currently have with the boxing community. And at some level, you could ask, what does it matter to register well with the boxing community? I mean, we are a relatively small community as it stands. Like, in terms of American sports, you can't say boxing is a top 6 or maybe not even a top 8 sport, like in the US. Now, whenever there's like a Gervonta Tank Davis fight or a Canelo fight, something like that, yeah, then, sports fans will come out for it. But, us who watch these fights week in and week out, it's a relatively small community. I mean, look, I went to this this Crawford versus Madrimov fight. I ran into multiple people who said, "Hey, what's good, Woog?" And me, I'm like looking over my shoulder like, damn, okay. Like, it's a niche sport with a small but passionate fan base. But yeah, let's get into Riyadh season. There's a lot to dive into, and in the wake of that mega event, there's just a lot to discuss. So this was in Los Angeles, right? And it was first of all, parking was $80. You know what I mean? And if you go far and find the off-site parking, you could get away with a $50 parking space. But when you're circling that Exposition Park area, do you really want to take another lap to try to find that $50 parking once you just passed that and you got to get over 4 lanes to try to get in there? It just wasn't the environment for a lot of patience, especially when like the Andy Cruz fight had already started and I wasn't trying to miss the David Morrell fight. So it is what it is. So look, first of all, the biggest star going into that event, it was Pitbull Cruz. Like, they were selling so many more Pitbull shirts than they were selling these like main event t-shirts or even these, Eminem t-shirts. Pitbull Cruz was getting the loudest applause when they were, show him backstage, kind of warming up. He was getting the biggest pop from the crowd. But look, I was going to do a recap of this fight the day after the event took place. But given my limited purview, because I was sitting in the stands, and yes, we did have the Jumbotron, but, I'm kind of discussing the fight with the people sitting around me, and my eyes are going between the actual ring and the Jumbotron. And I started talking about the fight. I recapped it, and I gave my opinion, right? My opinion after watching the fight live was that Crawford won the fight by a few rounds. So when they got to the scorecard and I heard 116 to 112, I was like, oh, okay. Then I heard 115 to 113 twice. And I was really surprised. I was very surprised. And then I heard, Crawford announces the winner, but then I see Eddie Hearn's reaction. Cause remember, he's backing Madrimov here. I see his he's just beside himself. And as soon as the scorecard was read, he like threw his arm out, was just enraged, and he was just yelling outside of the, to the outside of the ring, yelling at the judges, basically. He looked like an irate Bob Arum in that moment. And I just didn't get it. I thought he was trolling. I thought that he was kidding. I thought that he was just trying to play good promoter and backing his guy. So then, I issue I record the reaction, recapping all fights. But then I started seeing a lot of the conversation around the fight. And then I'm like, you know what? Before I issue this recap, let me rewatch this fight on TV, because I also bought the pay-per-view. Let me actually watch this fight. And because, look, I thought, and it's going to sound crazy, I thought that it was like a 9-3 type of fight. So then I'm rewatching the fight, and look, there was no, I couldn't have been more off in my assessment. I'm watching this fight now, the second time through, this time on the actual TJ, hey, Chilltown Boxing on Twitter. TJ says, sorry you had to rewatch that fight. But to be honest, when I was watching it in the crowd, it seemed like a relatively boring fight. I actually think that this fight is going to age into it's going to be the opposite of an instant classic. It's going to marinate, it's going to stew. And if we collectively revisit that fight, I think there was so much more to it than it just being like a boring chess match. You know what? You know how they say a high-speed chess match. I'm rewatching this fight and I'm like, I had no idea Crawford got hit hard with that many straight right hands. Now, there were no knockdowns in the fight, but look, Sean Porter, like on the broadcast, he gave Crawford 5 out of the first 6 rounds. Chris Mannix gave Madrimov the first 2 rounds. And as I'm watching round in and round by round, Crawford never pulled away in this fight. Yes, it did kind of, have like a simmering pace. It wasn't like there weren't a ton of punches thrown. But for anybody who thinks that Crawford comfortably won that fight, let me just ask, when is the last time we've seen a Crawford fight where he throws 160 more punches than the opponent, but they land equally? Where it's Crawford who is just throwing a whole bunch of volume, but landing at like 20-something%, like in the low 20s. Meanwhile, Madrimov is landing like 35 to 38% of his punches. When's the last time we've seen Crawford in a fight where he's the less efficient guy and it's actually the opponent who's the sharpshooter in there, making every punch count? TJ, so you had it 7-5 Bud. So you had it 115, 113, right? I could get with that. I think that is about the right scorecard. I wouldn't be totally upset with a draw. If one judge had it as a draw, I wouldn't think that was too far off. I think that my scorecards, when I was watching it in the arena, I thought that my scorecard was off. I thought that 9-3 would have been totally unfair to Madrimov. But, I did watch Richard Dwyer, Dwyer Boxing, and I could probably get a lot of jokes about how he gets it wrong, because he's a kind of like a gambling advisor. He tells you what bet he's making, and he loses on both sides of the bet a lot. Sometimes I will actually bet the opposite of where he's placing his bets. Like if he's betting this way and hedging with this, I'll go the other guy via decision, something like that. But he did make a good point that Madrimov doesn't sell his work. So he'll land a nice right hand. He'll even get Crawford sticking his tongue out in response. But he doesn't do anything body language wise where it gives the audience who might not have seen the clean punch land, it doesn't register well with them, because he just looks like he's just kind of going about his work. He doesn't act any differently when he lands with a nice combination versus when he gets, hit with 2 body shots. The body language is always the same. Let me take a quick sip. So Madrimov could have made a bigger case for himself simply by nodding his head when he hits Crawford with a clean right hand. And here's another thing about Madrimov. Not only was his footwork sick, like his feints, yes, he could have thrown more punches to, follow those feints up. He was feinting a ton. But it's those athletic foot feints where you're actually bouncing, like Janibek does it in some of his fights. It's a foot feint where you're changing levels and you're dipping with the feet in motion. And it's not like the clumsy stomp foot feint. It's a graceful, agile foot feint, and you're also doing your hands and your arms at the same time. So he's doing these feints, and his footwork, it never relented. Like, he was able to keep on doing that, because the idea is, if you got up right now and walked around and started doing those feints, your lower back would tire like in about 3 minutes if you're good. Like, if 3 to 6 minutes if you're in pretty decent shape. For you to go 12 3-minute rounds and keep on doing those feints, plus you're taking punches, which already stiffens your back and your neck out when you're taking jabs and shots to the body. But to keep on doing those feints throughout the course of the fight, that's tremendous. Most professional fighters can't do that. But Madrimov also has multiple styles of right hand. He's got that piston of a straight right, which he was landing. Like, Crawford, I feel, never figured that part out. Like, he was eating those right hands nearly as often as Madrimov was letting him go. But then he also has, and I was talking with Benji Tucker and my dad and my brother in the chat room. We'll say, use a baseball term. We'll say that piston of a straight right is like a doubles right hand, right? You hit it like a double into the, right center field gap. But then he also has that kind of unpredictable, and it's very occasional. He doesn't throw it a lot, but it's that you dip your head down. You see fighters do that a lot, and just throw an absolute home run of an overhand right. I saw him land that one a couple of times. I don't know how Crawford was able to take that in stride, because that's the type of overhand right hand that can create viral knockouts. It is so vicious. and it's just, I want to see who he fights next and how they handle it, because between the feinting, the nice jab, and look, Crawford being staying in this southpaw stance was able to mitigate Madrimov's jab to the body and his left hand. His left jab and his right hand to the body, because Madrimov likes the jab to the body, but Crawford, being in his southpaw stance throughout just about the whole fight, took that body shot away. Okay, so we didn't get a lot of that, but with the varied right hands, that's going to be hell to deal with for future opponents. So I think that one of the takeaways is, one, Crawford is every bit as tough as we thought he was, but it was surprising that he had to dig that deep against Madrimov. Some of us thought that Madrimov had a decent shot. I think that the betting odds were way off on this one. Boxing Fan is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Oh, QT is in the house. Thank you for coming through. But yeah, this was a tough fight. And again, upon rewatch, it was a lot closer than what I came away with when I saw it in the stadium. Let's see. Yeah, Bud did take a ton of those right hands. And some of them were coming through the guard. Like, Crawford would get hit with one, and then he would put the guard up, the high guard, and he would immediately eat another one that splits the guard. So he had Crawford's his respect on multiple levels, which is why you never got that front foot heavy Crawford. He would do it in short moments when he would burst with a combination, but it was never like a sustained, front foot approach. It was always Madrimov who was feinting his way into Crawford's space, and it was Crawford trying to draw the line as he would kind of move laterally and circle a little bit. It was Crawford who was always kind of waiting for Madrimov to make a move so then he could counter that. Now, yes, when Madrimov would just feint and not make a move, then you would get Crawford sticking that long jab out, right? But for the most part, it was a no, you make a move. No, you make a move. Nah, you make a move. It was a lot of that. But it just made for a competitive. Yeah, it was a bit of a slow burner, but it was very interesting when I rewatched that one. Very interesting fight. And I think that, again, when we revisit that and we, like when Crawford is nearing retirement or has retired, and we look at, the body of work, depending on what happens with Madrimov's career, that can be one of those kind of early, we didn't know it was a classics. Kind of like Lennox Lewis versus Vitaly Klitschko. We knew something about Vitaly Klitschko. We didn't know how good he was, because the Klitschkos were kind of buzzing, but this one was a late replacement. Vitaly was replacing, I think, Kurt Johnson. I mean, you want to talk about rough luck in taking that replacement on short notice. But yeah, when I was watching that, and I think it was a daytime fight, it might have been a daytime fight. I don't recall. But when I was watching that fight, I had no idea that I was watching like a future classic. I just knew Lennox Lewis got, he has his hands full with this equally tall Vitaly Klitschko guy. And he was lucky that he caused that cut with the punch and that the fight was stopped, because who knows where that fight was headed. Yeah, Sal, I think that the unspoken thing was, hey, Bud Crawford just became a 4-division champion. So let's, tip of the hat on that one. You know what I mean? We're talking about how tough it was, how much Bud didn't score the knockout, how his knockout streak came to an end, how this guy basically gave as good as he got. And this was like a 115 to 113 type of fight. But yeah, let's acknowledge that Terrence Crawford is now a 4-division champion. And it's not like a Mikey Garcia. Adrian Broner? Is it Adrian Broner? No, he wasn't a 4. I'd have to look back, but he might have been a 4-division belt holder. Not all 4-division belt holders are equal. I'll put it like that. But yeah, Terrence Crawford undisputed in 2 divisions, and we'll see where he goes from here, because look, whether Bud can handle the rest of the 154 elite really depends on how good Madrimov is or isn't. You know what I mean? I don't know that I would favor Virgil Ortiz if they were to announce Ortiz versus Madrimov. You know what I mean? I might make Madrimov a slight favorite because of what he showed in the Bud fight, not to mention against, Kurbanov, where he made that look like easy work. And Kurbanov was undefeated with a couple impressive wins too. But let's see. Let me get to some of what you're saying. TJ, you thought that Bud pulled away in the championship rounds. Upon first watch, I certainly thought that. But even in the rewatch, yes, he did start to land more, but he was still eating big shots in the 11th and 12th as he was becoming more aggressive, which is why he wasn't more aggressive earlier, because when he would start to open up, he would eat more leather. So, yeah, I think that the 11th and 12th were maybe a little bit more clear for Bud, but not much. Even those rounds I thought were pretty damn close. Let's see. Pablo B said it might be kind of disappointing for those who wanted to see Mom's spaghetti on Madrimov's sweater. Yeah, speaking of Mom's spaghetti, it was kind of cool that we got a maybe not, I don't know. I usually don't like televised concerts, but somebody was texting me. My boy Ronaldo was texting me, and he was asking, do the mics sound that bad in the stadium? Because it sounds terrible. This Eminem concert sounds terrible, watching it. And it didn't sound that bad in the stadium. I don't know if it was like a different feed that was, that the mics were going into, where it was the broadcast version versus the live version, but it didn't sound bad. And I was able to get my ticket for less than $300, right? And that's with fees and everything. Usually a fight of that magnitude, I feel, would be more expensive. I almost felt like it felt like a little bit of a discount ticket, especially when you factor in that you got a kind of a free Eminem concert in there too, and a deep undercard. I wasn't mad at that price, and I wasn't gonna go. I didn't decide to get the ticket until literally 3 hours before the event. It was a super late purchase. Let's see. QT said it's the feints and clinching that did him in. To me, I don't see how that shows aggression or ring generalship or him being the bigger fighter. Yeah, maybe he should have probably been a little bit rougher. Like there weren't a ton of clinches, but the feinting, it just looked like uncertainty, right? It looked like it was more uncertain about how do I enter versus it being by design. You know what I mean? So yeah, I could see how that doesn't impress judges. But even as it stood, it was like pretty close on the scorecards. Oh yeah, thank you, TJ. Hit the like, please. I'm always terrible at any reminder of that. Let's see. Ventru is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Personally, never interested in a Canelo fight. How do you think Crawford would fare against Fundora? I think it's tough sledding. I think that Fundora could win some of those rounds. I would like to think that Bud is skilled enough to handle that very, very unique style of pressure, though. I think that I feel like Madrimov is more multifaceted than Sebastian Fundora. With Fundora, what you see is pretty much what you get. Now, he does have different ways of fighting. We have seen a jab-heavy Fundora. He was jab-heavy in those first 2 rounds against Tim Tszyu before Tim Tszyu became a bloody mask, and then it became more of a fight and less of a boxing match. But, Fundora is a pretty decent boxer from the outside, but man, his two-fisted attack in close, for that fight to work out for Bud, his punch will really have to have carried to 154, which I really think that the jury is still out on. I don't know if Bud is as devastating a puncher at 154 as he was at 147. There were a couple moments where he looked like he started to really kind of back Madrimov up, and especially to the body. There were a couple times where he would hit Madrimov to the body, or he would throw like a left counter uppercut or something like that. And Madrimov, you would see a little change in the body language where Madrimov takes a different step back or kind of recalibrates and resets in a way that was a little bit different than his other resets. But I would favor Crawford. Who do I think Crawford would have the most problem with? Maybe Tim Tszyu, somebody like that. Maybe it might turn out to be Madrimov when it's all said and done. But I think that Virgil Ortiz would be a tough fight for Crawford. Shoot, I don't know how Crawford would do against like Jesus Ramos. We just haven't gotten a good enough sample size of Bud at 154 to see how he would do against even like the top 6 to 10 guys in the division. Like, I would think that he beats Erickson Lubin. I really would. But look, I want to see, not that I want to see Bud tested. I've seen Bud tested, and I know that he's not going to fight any of these 6 to 10 guys. Bud is at the stage of his career where he's going to make every fight count. But you know what? Based on how the sanctioning bodies are handling things at 154, I wouldn't be surprised if we get Bud versus Sebastian Fundora next. I mean, Fundora doesn't have anything scheduled right now. They were talking about Fundora versus Spence. They didn't make that. They were talking about Tim Tszyu versus Lubin. They didn't make that. So Bud versus a unification fight between Bud and Fundora, I would like that. I would also like it if they do Bud versus the winner of Virgil Ortiz and Bohachuk. I know that wouldn't be a unification fight, but I would like the fight. And then on the other side, you could just run it back between Fundora and Tim Tszyu. I think that that's kind of the way to go. They've pretty much been on the shelf since that fight. Fundora had to recover from his broken nose. Tim Tszyu had to recover from that nasty slice to the top of the head. Might as well run that one back because of the circumstances and the nature of their first fight. Let's see. TJ, so you would favor Crawford over Tim Tszyu? Yeah, I could see why, but I mean, there's also the Terrell Goucher fight to point at for Tim Tszyu, but I almost look at that as that, I feel like every fighter, when they're like really coming up, they have that fight that for whatever reason is tougher than it should have been. Boots Ennis versus Karen Chukagian. whoever that was, right? Karen, the guy who was moving around the ring. Not that that was a tough fight for Bud, but he looked less than impressive. Or not Bud, I'm sorry, Boots, Ennis. But Boots looked less than impressive in that one. David Morrell's latest fight against Hot Rod Kalajdzic, that was a very uninspiring performance. But it's, the boxing public has such a short memory that if David Morrell shows out in his next fight, he's going to be right back in the good graces, and people are going to say, "Oh yeah, Morrell versus Benavidez. Let's get it right." But Tim Tszyu, I think it would be tough for Crawford. And you know what? Tim Tszyu's got a style that much more closely resembles Canelo's style than Madrimov's does. Like, yes, I think that it would be easy to write off Crawford's chances against Canelo based on what we saw with Crawford versus Madrimov, but I almost think that it's apples to oranges in terms of the style of opponent. Madrimov has a ton of energy. You might even say that some of it is wasted energy, but he's constantly moving, constantly feinting. Canelo, he's very economical in his movements. He doesn't waste too many punches. If he's wasting a punch, it's a throwaway punch to lead to a bigger punch. Like one of those where this throwaway punch leads your head to go that way. So then you put the power punch behind that. Like he caught Billy Joe Saunders, right? You start to gauge the person's it's pattern recognition. And then you start throwing the punch to where their head's gonna be, not where it currently is. So Canelo doesn't waste anything. I just wonder what it will look like with the big and bad Canelo relatively, right? Canelo trying to walk down Terrence Crawford. Like, it's one thing if the guy's fainting, and, Crawford's kind of having a tough time getting a read on the guy because you don't want to get hit by that overhand right. You don't like getting hit by that straight right. And even the guy's jab is finding a home. I think Crawford would struggle big time with Canelo, but it would be for different reasons. But Crawford versus Tim Tszyu, damn, I would really want to see it. I'd really want to see it. Let's see. TJ said Fundora gets hit way too easily, way too much. Bud would stop him. I could see that happening. I mean, it looked like Tim Tszyu was on his way to stopping Fundora before he couldn't see anymore because of his, because of the blood all in his face. And he had to have been getting kind of lightheaded with the amount of blood that he was losing. Like, there was a moment in that fight where I saw as soon as he became the bloody mask and then things started to go well for Fundora, and then you started to see Tim Tszyu start to actually get backed up. I was like, damn, is Fundora about to stop Tim Tszyu? But yeah, I could see Crawford stopping Sebastian Fundora. Let's see. Sal said Eddie Hearn is having a terrible go with these Riyadh cards. Yeah, he was going 0 for 5 against Queensberry. That was ridiculous. And now with this one, although Eddie had to know that he was up against it, going against, putting Madrimov in there against Terrence Crawford. And Madrimov was the champion, Benji. And was he treated like a champion by those judges though? I don't think he was. I think he was treated like the visitor, the guest, the challenger. And it was almost like, Crawford's got this emeritus status where, more often than not, he might get more love on the scorecards than he would have gotten like 4 to 5 years ago. Boxing fans say, oh, thank you. He said, I love the graphic tees you rock. So this one, okay. So in full disclosure, I bought the Eminem one in the stadium. So this one was like 40 something. This one I got for like 20 something. I got this one from one of the merchants as I was exiting the 110 freeway. Because the 110 freeway, it was already pretty loaded. So you're sitting, waiting to exit the freeway because there's so many cars leading into that, the Coliseum. If you're familiar with downtown LA, the Coliseum area, Exposition Park near USC. And you had like a line of like merchants, people just out there selling t-shirts as you're exiting that freeway. That's where I got this one. So I got hit for like $22 or $25. And these merchants are good too. They got they've got the Zelle ready. They got their Venmo ready. Much like the people selling bacon wrapped hot dogs outside of the venue. But thank you. Yeah, I try to make the graphic tees a theme. Sometimes I'll even have like a subliminal reason why I'm wearing a certain tee. Like if I'm covering a fighter like from Australia, like George Kambosos, I might rock a Tame Impala tee or something like that. Yeah, different reasons for different fights. But yeah, I try to keep it somewhat theme based. Pablo B said, in 154, at 154, give some love to Yoenis El Bandolero Teles. Yeah, you know, I've seen him a little bit. I haven't seen him to the degree where I would be able to gauge how I think he would fare against the top 10 in the division. By the way, if anybody's watching the Olympics, I need to catch up with the last couple days, but there's one guy who I hope is able to get to the States from Cuba. His name is Erislandy Alvarez Borges. There was another Cuban who had won 2 gold medals. His name was Cordova. I don't want to spoil anything, but he just fought a couple of days ago in the semifinals, I believe. But this other guy, and I don't know if this guy who I'm referring to now has lost since the last time I saw him, but this guy's got some nice punches and he sets them up really well. He's got hand speed, boxing ability. But yeah, he's a Cuban fighter named Erislandy Alvarez Borges. But yeah, he's kind of like the ringer that I'm seeing right now, in at least on the men's side, Olympic boxing wise, aside from like Jalilov and the people who we already know. You know, Jalilov is a professional who's kind of rising up the ranks right now, and he beat this other Samoan super heavyweight named what's his name, Tera Moana. I think his name is Tera Moana. He's Australian, and he fought a pretty good fight with Jalilov, and that was a fight that I wanted to see because Tera Moana, I think, has a future professionally at heavyweight. Jay Foreman is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Let's see. Yeah, QT. Crawford might get aged out at 154. Look, I think that it's already kind of a dicey time right now. And maybe it wasn't obvious until we saw this fight against Madrimov, but Crawford at this point, he's turning 37 next month. He's going to have to be careful right now because I could see him struggling even with guys who you wouldn't expect him to struggle with. But again, at this point of his career, every fight matters financially. There's got to be a huge incentive. And I'm sure whatever Crawford was thinking going into this fight with Madrimov, he might be thinking a little bit different right now because he knows he was in a tough fight. You saw the way that his eye was all puffed up. You saw those punches that he was taking. I don't know what he's truly thinking to himself right now. Like, I don't know if he's got like a faster, let's get out of the game plan than he did, going into this one. Like, he knew that this was the, sort of the final run, the final chapter. But I wonder if even that is kind of expedited at this point, given what he just experienced against Madrimov. Let's see. What do I think is next for Crawford? Looking like the Canelo fight is dead in the water, especially with the trash talk between Canelo and Turki Al-Sheikh right now. Al-Sheikh really kind of laid into him like early this morning, and I was not expecting to see him actually kind of get into the mud and act like a social media socialite, where you start just talking trash and throwing shade. Like, he actually went there and he kind of said that Canelo's trying to pick easy fights now, and he really laid into him. And I don't think that that's going to help the business between the two. It sounds like he made an offer and Canelo wasn't trying to hear it at the time. And Canelo says that he was just focused on Berlanga and he didn't tell the Turki Al-Sheikh what he wanted to hear. So it just sounds like they kind of butt heads whenever they did start to, communicate about future fights, future opportunities. So right now it appears dead in the water. But, if Crawford really wants it, now Crawford is the third most powerful power broker in that situation, right? Because it's Turki and Canelo, and then it's Crawford. So even if Crawford wants it really badly, he's got to get them to get along and to do business, or else the fight's not happening unless I don't see another promoter having the money to put that fight on. Yeah, he didn't sound confident when asked about Canelo after the fight. He sounded relatively confident beforehand, but it was also like right after the fight. And I think that, Crawford's the type who will, just like a lot of elite boxers, who will rationalize why this last fight was so tough and how that could be corrected for when you fight Canelo, even if it's 2 divisions higher. And you know what? What did Crawford say towards the end of that interview when he was asked about, do you still want to fight Canelo given the difficulty that you just had against Madrimov? He said, yeah, I don't need the fight, but yeah, I'm trying to make history. And what's the last thing he said? And financially, right? So that tells you it's almost like well, what the hell? Let's do it. Like, even if you don't love your chances, it sounds like you kind of override that feeling with, hey, but I'm about to make X amount of, tens of millions of dollars in this fight against Canelo. Let's do it. So, it is possible that if we get the fight, that he's doing it for financial reasons primarily, and not because he sees a clear path to victory there, And plus, just if you look at the history of guys jumping up multiple divisions, it didn't work out for Rigondeaux against Lomachenko, Mikey Garcia against Errol Spence, Amir Khan against Canelo, Kell Brook against Triple G, Jermell Charlo against Canelo. It usually doesn't work out. Canelo doing it against, Sergey Kovalev, that's the exception, but they were in different phases of their career by that point too. You said Turkey is turning into drama queen. Julio, thank you for coming through. Edward Espinoza is in the house. Thank you. Oh, you said military stuff is keeping you busy. I hope you're all good, man. I hope you're all good and safe, and that it's relatively good, military stuff, and that you're all right. Hope all is well. And thank you for your service first and foremost. Let's see. Jay Foreman said he's just saying what everyone already knows about Canelo. Canelo's not a fighter, so he doesn't. So Canelo, he's in a different stage right now than he was when he was taking fights. That look, I will always respect that he fought Triple G, especially those first 2 times. Yes, it was a little bit later than we would have wanted, but hey, going into that fight, I thought Triple G was going to win. I think Triple G won that first fight. I always felt that second fight was a toss-up. That one really could have gone either way, in my opinion. But like, Canelo was on his front foot in that rematch, and it was Triple G that became jab heavy. And imagine, Triple G, the monster at 160, who just had that killer streak, going jab heavy to Canelo's power punches. That was a sight to see in that rematch. So, Canelo went 24 rounds with near prime Triple G and didn't hit the canvas once. I'll always respect him for that. But yeah, right now, he doesn't seem like he wants the most dangerous smoke. He looks like he's very cautious when it comes to smoke inhalation, and he's really concerned about his lungs when it comes to that. Canelo doesn't seem to want to, dive into the deepest waters right now. And, and it's too bad, for anybody. Look, he's had a ton of fights. He has had a ton of professional fights, but it's just unfortunate that David Benavidez didn't have that WBC belt when Canelo decided to storm the gates. And before, I gave Canelo the benefit of the doubt, and I thought if Benavidez had a belt when Canelo stormed the gates at 168, that he would have fought David Benavidez. Now, I'm totally rethinking that. And by the way, check the Chris Mannix podcast when Timothy Bradley was interviewed on it. Timothy Bradley called it out perfectly. He's all, no, he wouldn't have. He said he went on the British tour. He went out and whooped Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, and collected those belts because the coast was clear, because David Benavidez didn't have a belt anymore at that time. So he saw a path to becoming undisputed while mitigating risk. And Benji Tucker, we've been on opposite sides of that argument. But you know what? I'll say right now, I'm kind of, headed towards that side of it. Like, I don't think that Canelo would have fought Benavidez, even if he was holding the WBC belt at that time. Because remember, because he lost that belt on the scale, the WBC put that belt up for grabs in the WBA title fight with Callum Smith and Canelo. So Canelo was able to win 2 belts in one fight. Yeah, QT. I was real mad when Mikey Garcia fought Spence. I wanted that Garcia versus Loma fight so bad. I just wanted to see Mikey mix it up with more elite, either 140 guys or even 135 guys. Like, I remember when he beat Robert Easter. I thought the sky was the limit for Mikey Garcia. But, you know, the best that you got after that was like Lipinets, maybe Jesse Vargas in his second to last fight. But Mikey Garcia, I feel, fell out of love with the sport pretty early, around the time maybe that he had that 2 to 3 year layoff. And then he came back. He was a little bit bigger, started competing at 135 and 140 and then 147. It's like, what are you doing, Mikey? Because he was a really good fighter in his prime. But he had no business fighting Errol Spence. But I'm not going to lie. When they made that fight, Mikey was looking so good in his other fights that I thought that maybe he knows something that I don't know. Maybe he sees something in Errol Spence. And I looked at Mikey Garcia as being the quicker, snappier puncher between the two. So I'm thinking maybe he sees a way of shortening his punches and getting in there. I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit of fat on Errol Spence's punches sometimes when he starts coming in and mixing up the attack. Maybe Garcia sees something. It couldn't have been any further from the truth, though. He had no business in there. He had no more business in there than Rigondeaux had in there with Lomachenko. Karma Serene, smoke inhalation. Yeah. Thank you for coming through. And I want to ask you about the Jermell Charlo thing. I've been looking like, is Jermell Charlo going to continue to fight at 154? Like, I hope he does, because 154 is pretty lit right now. But I just don't know. He hadn't updated his Instagram since before that fight with Canelo. Like, there wasn't one like Instagram update. So I'm like, damn, what happened to Jermell Charlo? Like, Jermell Charlo, we more or less kind of know what's going on with Jermell Charlo, unfortunately. But Jermell Charlo, I'm like, damn, man, it was just one bad showing. You got paid a bunch of money. Did the money that you just got and maybe the ridicule in the way that you fought that fight against Canelo and just the whole experience, did it jade you from the boxing game? Like, do you love the sport a little bit less? Because Jermell was the guy between the two twin brothers who loved the sport, who was trying to make history, who was trying to dare to be great and all that. It's just weird if we went from, like, instead of 0 to 100, 100 to 0 after one fight. But we've seen that before. Look at Andy Ruiz. It hasn't really been the same since that win against Anthony Joshua. Let's see. Oh, Jay Foreman, you thought Mikey had a chance too against Errol Spence. Yeah. Oh, so he posted a story. Jermell posted a story saying that he was going back to 154 and going back and forth with Lubin. I guess that wouldn't be a terrible fight to come back to. Lubin wants it. Jermell could use I don't want to call it a soft touch, but I'll say a winnable fight at 154. Like, I don't think his next fight should be against Madrimov, or against Virgil Ortiz. Not to say that Jermell can't win those fights. Well, first of all, I would be surprised if Jermell can comfortably get back to 154. Like, he's well into his early, going into his mid 30s now. So if you could fight that fight with Canelo where you put some bulk and some muscle on and then shrink back down to 154, I would be pretty surprised. But yeah, if he's down to do 154 and he's able to do it, that just makes the division that much better, because he was undisputed champion. He's only got, those 2 losses to Harrison and to Canelo, but he's, to me, as good as anybody in that division if he is still prime Jermell Charlo. I just always question when guys have long layoffs. Not that it's been tremendously long. I mean, we're getting into a year since that fight. So it's not too long to come back from. But if you extend that to a year and a half, 2 years, then I start, it's a red flag. It's like, damn, we might not ever see that prime guy again, like Jermell Charlo. But yeah, a couple notes. One, Valenzuela, I'll keep it real. And I said this on the top of the hour. I had issued but I recorded a recap on Riyadh season when I was coming back from the event. But after I gave my takes, especially on Crawford versus Madrimov, where I saw it wide when I was watching on the Jumbotron and in the ring, when I wanted to rewatch it and not just do a recap really not knowing what the hell I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Because if I come in saying that I saw 10-2 or 9 rounds to 3, if I came in saying that on the recap, I feel like that's me just kind of going off the cuff based on what I saw with limited purview as opposed to actually watching it in the rewatch. So I held off on even issuing a recap. But with Pitbull versus Valenzuela, I didn't think Valenzuela could box that well for that long. I thought that his style, Valenzuela's style, lent itself to getting into an eventual shootout with Pitbull. And I thought that a shootout, yes, he does have a puncher's chance, but it would probably over time bode well for Pitbull because I thought Pitbull would be the more durable between the two. Valenzuela, let's give him props because, you know, when you're an up and coming fighter, and we saw him, you know, we saw him with some good knockouts early in his career. Then we saw him lose to De Los Santos. Then we saw those 2 fights with Chris Colbert where he put Colbert to sleep in the rematch after losing a, we'll say, very disputed decision in their first fight. Valenzuela, many thought was still very vulnerable. And when a fighter, I think, falls in love with his power and he has the type of knockout power that Valenzuela has, you often then see their boxing ability start to decline, start to kind of deteriorate, and they start becoming, you know, knockout punch heavy. We see it with a lot of guys. They start to load up on some bombs and they stop doing a lot of the sweet science, you know, things like Deontay Wilder. I thought when he fought Bermane Stiverne the first time that he was actually working on a back foot game and he had a pretty good jab going and his hook was coming along. He started to go downhill once it was established. Well, he was always a knockout artist, but he just started like kind of becoming less and less of a sweet scientist, more and more of a, it's either feast or famine with the knockout type of fighter. I'm impressed that Valenzuela, who's now working with Robert Garcia, right? Instead of working up in the state of Washington with like Benavidez and those guys, Jose Valenzuela is actually improving as a boxer. So he still has his power, and he was sitting down on some of those right hands. He wasn't sitting, left hands. He's a southpaw. He was sitting down on some of those lefts, and you saw him kind of stand Pitbull up a couple times. But he was pivoting and moving, and he was throwing, like, not loading up on the right hook, but he was throwing a hook that was kind of like a space filler that he could then pivot off of and make Pitbull have to reset and then come find him again. I didn't think Rayo had that in him. I really didn't. So I was wrong on that one. I mean, I was wrong on a couple of these, to be honest. I thought Andy Ruiz was going to beat Jarrell Miller, which was a little bit of a slog of a fight. And Andy Ruiz, to his, you know, he did, in fairness, like really damage his hand and wrist. Like, I don't think we're going to see Ruiz back in the ring for, not that we see Ruiz back in the ring within 2 years of his last fight, usually anyway. But even if he wants to come back, he's going to have to take some time, I think, to heal. That looked pretty bad. But Jarrell Miller exceeded my expectations. Yes, some of that might have been because Ruiz had a bad hand, but Ruiz also gassed tremendously. He looked really spent. And I thought that Jarrell, Big Baby Miller deserved the decision win there. But even in getting a draw, I think that he kind of revived his career a little bit with that performance. I think that you could very well see Jarrell Miller in another fight, maybe do Big Baby versus Big Baby after Big Baby Anderson got absolutely demolished by Martin Bakole. He showed a lot of heart, Anderson did, but Martin Bakole, you know, if anybody got the biggest boost besides maybe Madrimov, maybe including Madrimov though, Bakole came away from that Riyadh season event with a whole, he had a reputation of being a big, bad, dangerous guy to begin with. But the way that he just marched, Jared Anderson down and knocked him out in the 5th, that was so impressive. And, you know, it looked like if Anderson kept on landing with some of those combinations and was able to get Bakole into the second half of the fight, it looked like Jared Anderson, after getting dropped towards the end of the first round, might have been able to find something and pull it off. We didn't see it because he didn't make it that far. He got hit with that uppercut, for the second knockdown, just as he was dipping his head. He dipped his head right into it. I couldn't see it, from where I was sitting. even on TV, you couldn't really see it until they showed the replay from another angle. It's like, oh, that's what happened with that second knockdown. Because you saw Anderson's head snap back as he, dipped into the uppercut. And that was the beginning of the end right there. But Anderson showed a lot of heart. I think that he will struggle with anybody with a skill set like Bakole. And there are a lot of heavy punchers like Bakole, but there are not too many people who do it like Bakole. Like Bacole's got a certain way of conducting his offense that is just hell if you're not prepared to handle it. You said, QT said in hindsight, Bakole versus Anderson looks like a Anderson cash out fight after the arrest. So yeah, look, if it wasn't for Saudi Arabian money, I don't think that fight happens. I don't think if that fight happens on regular Top Rank. First of all, I don't think Bob would have paid Anderson and Bakole enough for them to both agree to that fight. But career management wise, look, yes, Anderson was the favorite, but I didn't see him going in as being like a 2.5 to 1 favorite or whatever he was. I looked at that as being like a near 50-50, like, damn, you sure you want to do this, big baby? Like, that's how I was looking at it. And I was thinking like, yo, if Big Baby pulls this off, then he's as good as, the ESPN commentators say he is, when they start kind of going over the A-side fighter. But we got what we got. And now it's going to be a big question on how Anderson manages his career going forward. Does he take a step back and, take 2 easy fights in a row? Because he said that he wants to retire at 26, 27 years old. Well, you just had a huge career setback. It's not going to be a quick run to the title. Like, if he beat Bakole, then maybe in 1 or 2 more fights, maybe then you could get a title shot, assuming the belts get splintered and they're not, occupied in this whole Tyson Fury, Usyk, who just beat Philip Ergovich, AJ, Daniel Dubois, whatever, becomes of that, and whatever happens if there are any title unification, usually there's a bottleneck when it comes to the belts at heavyweight. Outside of that, I felt like if Anderson beat Bakole, he would be 1 win over Joseph Parker or somebody like that away from maybe being next in line for a title shot. By the way, I hope Joseph Parker gets a good, meaningful, lucrative next fight, if not a title shot next. I feel like he's still kind of being a little bit slept on, even after beating Wilder and Zhilei Zhang. As far as Bakole, I wouldn't be mad at seeing Bakole versus Zhilei Zhang after this. You get Big Bang versus the last king of Scotland. And I think I would favor Zhilei Zhang. But here's the one thing about it, and I'm not going to go too deep into this one, but Zhilei Zhang might not throw enough punches. He's more skilled than Bakole, but Bacole's higher volume and he hits hard. Zhilei Zhang has been, shows that he's got a really good chin, but Bakole could actually win rounds against Zhilei Zhang, assuming he doesn't like walk into that sneaky right hook that knocked out Joe Joyce in the rematch, or that leveling straight left hand. I would want to see that fight. Let's see. DJ, thank you for coming through. He said, I do wonder how Crawford's going to look a year from now. He's turning 37 in September. I wonder if his age might already be making a difference. Maybe at 35, he would have been a little bit more voluminous or a little bit more willing to jump. I don't know. Madrimov, the jury, we don't know how good Madrimov is. We know how good he looked against Crawford, which was damn good. But I've got to see Madrimov versus, I don't know, Jesus Ramos. Brian Mendoza needs to get well after that beating at the hands of Bohachuk. But I would want to see Madrimov against like a top 8 guy at 154, just, outside of, Terrence Crawford, to really gauge where he is. The Kurbanov one, was enough to really impress me. I thought Kurbanov might win that fight. Let's see. Yeah, the ring would need some stronger supports with Bakole versus Zhilei Zhang. That would be like a combined, close to 300 pounds, if not more. But hey, the ring held for Andy Ruiz versus Big Baby Miller. So there you go. Julio, thank you for coming through. Said Benavidez, Morrell, and Crawford. None of them look great after moving up on weight. Yeah, but it was all of their debuts in that division. Sometimes we get that. You know, it takes a couple of fights for somebody to get acclimated to the division. Maybe that's what's going on. But it's also like a couple divisions that have big jumps, you know? Like I look at 135 to 140 being more doable than like 147 to 154. Just look at the average height of the guys at 147 versus 154. You could be at 147, have De La Hoya's 5'9", 5'10-ish height and be a taller 147 guy. Errol Spence was a taller 147 guy. You go up to 154, if you're 5'8 to 5'9", 5'10, you're going to be a shorter 154. Like Madrimov, he's a shorter 154 guy, you know? So, you know, Virgil was a tall 147 guy at 5'10. He's going to be kind of like a regular height 154 guy. Bohachuk's about 6 feet. So like you're talking about a 7-pound weight jump, 147 to 154. And then, you know, I look at 154 to 160, the 6-pound jump, as being a little bit more doable. If the guy's like a natural, or if the guy's been at 154, I look at the transition to 160 as being a little bit easier than 168 to 175, or even 160 to 168, because now you're talking about like an 8-pound jump. But let's see. So a couple of more things I wanted to weigh in on before we peace out. Jarrett Hurd versus Jason Rosario in a couple of weeks. I don't love either of those guys going forward with the career. Jarrett Hurd, I feel, has been his style. To me, he always got hit too much. Even when he was undefeated, even when he was beating Erislandy Lara, always got hit too much for me. But he's actually looking a big step too slow. And Jason Rosario, now he's been stopped to the body. He gets stopped to the body a lot. He got stopped against Brian Mendoza, stopped to the body pretty much against, Erickson Lubin. Stopped to the body against, Nathaniel Gallimore way back in the day. But yeah, Jarrett Hurd versus Jason Rosario is going to be on one of those Wednesday Pro Box cards. Also, they were talking about doing Jai Opetaia versus Chris Billiam-Smith, or Billam-Smith. And it sounds like Chris Billam-Smith and his team haven't like come to terms, and Jai Opetaia sounds like he's kind of frustrated with the negotiations. But Opetaia wants a unification fight, and I would love to see that at cruiserweight. Pacquiao's exhibition, I hope that's all the evidence that we need to see, and that he needs to see that he needs to stop. Like, that was not cool, seeing him against Ampo, who was a pretty athletic fighter, who was a lot bigger than Pacquiao. But that was one of the only times, including the fight against Ugas, where Pacquiao looked a little bit sluggish. Pacquiao's whole game has always been predicated on speed, volume, jump in and jump out, overwhelming the opponent with activity, athleticism. He's just one of those freaks of nature that we might not ever see again. Pacquiao was a special case, and I hope he's got enough money to walk away from fighting, exhibitions, all of this stuff. I hope that he could just ride off into the sunset, maybe, you know, continue the political career. I don't know how that's going. I know he's lost an election, but that did not look good. That exhibition against Pacquiao, that looked like if it went 8 rounds instead of 3, Pacquiao might have gotten stopped if this Ampo guy had 8-round conditioning. Even though Pacquiao started to, you know, throw more punches in the 3rd round. So maybe he was taking a couple rounds to shake the rust off and was just kind of getting into the flow. I don't know, but it didn't look great. Caleb Plant is going to be on the undercard for this Canelo fight. Rolly Romero is going to be on the undercard. Erislandy Lara defending his middleweight belt against Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia was going to find a way to back his way into a 160-pound title shot one way or another. I think I might be favoring the 41-year-old Erislandy Lara, though. Tell me if I'm crazy there. Sandy Ryan versus Michaela Mayer. They just made that fight. That's actually a pretty good one. Jaime Munguia versus Eric Bazinian. It's okay, but hey, Munguia just fought Canelo. Bazinian is kind of a top 10-ish guy at 168. That fight's taking place on September 20th. They just rescheduled Jack Catterall versus Regis Prograis October 26th. So that rescheduling was official. It was not a major injury, but a small injury to Jack Catterall that forced a postponement there. Yeah, I was texting with DMing TJ Chilltown Boxing on Twitter about that Luis Alberto Lopez versus Angelo Leo fight. That's this Saturday. This is going to be Alberto Lopez's fourth title defense. And I know TJ, you said that you were leaning Angelo Leo kind of ish there. Tell me if I'm wrong, but 4 title defenses is a lot. And I don't care how good you are, but when you're fighting just the next guy up, it's hard to be champion for a long time, depending on the quality of your mandatory challengers. But Luis Alberto Lopez has been fighting pretty decent mandatories. So I wouldn't be totally surprised if Angelo Leo beats Luis Alberto Lopez. Just like you can't be too shocked when like a Espinoza beats Robeisy Ramirez. And you shouldn't be shocked if Espinoza loses in his next title defense. That's just the way it goes when it comes to elite boxing. It's only the standouts that are able to sustain undefeated careers while fighting other elite or near elite guys. Let's see. Yeah, Luis Alberto Lopez is doing his thing. He's been building up a pretty nice resume. Knockout win over Michael Conlon, a win over Josh Warrington, a win over Joet Gonzalez. But with, let's see, I wish they had more unification fights in that division. Like I would love to see like Lopez versus like a Lee Wood or somebody like that. But it just doesn't really happen at 126 for whatever reason. Maybe there's not enough money in that division. Maybe they're not getting paid enough to start taking these unnecessary risks. Plus, you always have the promotional politics as well. Let's see. Navarrete versus Oscar Valdez 2. So Navarrete's coming back to 130. Thank God, right? Like Navarrete just been like weight hopping. I'm like, yo, chill. And I get it. He wants to pick up a belt here, then move up. Pick up a belt here, then move up. That's kind of been his career path, right? But yo, chill. Go back to 130 because I didn't love him at 130 when he first went to 130, especially the way that he looked against Liam Wilson. He looked a lot better against Oscar Valdez, but I don't love this Navarrete versus Valdez 2 fight. I want them to kind of mix it up and fight other guys. But yeah, that fight I think is official now for December 7th. Let's see. By the way, who y'all got between Virgil Ortiz and Sergey Bohachuk? I'm going to be issuing my preview of that fight early tomorrow morning. But yeah, let me know who you think is going to take that between Ortiz and Bohachuk. And also, I don't know if this is true, but it sounds like the IBF ordered Murtazaliev, Bakram Murtazaliev versus Tim Tszyu. So that might actually go down at 154. So that would be another route for Tim Tszyu to not recapture that WBO 154-pound title, but to now become a 2-time champ by earning the IBF belt if he could beat Murtazaliev. Benji Tucker said Lee Wood go. Yeah, Benji and I, that's my cousin. And we always talk boxing, but we have such a respect for Lee Wood. And and we laugh when we talk boxing all the time, but just the fact that you can never count that guy out, the fact that, he's that guy, the dude that you want in the foxhole with you. You know what I mean? Because he goes to battle and it could look like it's totally bleak. As long as he's standing upright and throwing punches, he's in the fight. We have now seen him turn things around against Josh Warrington, turn it around against, come back and win the rematch against Mauricio Lara, who didn't look good in his next fight. That's another guy. Remember I was saying that some guys, their boxing ability deteriorates once they start to fall in love with their power. Add Mauricio Lara to that list. But yeah, Lee Wood did it against Lara in the rematch. And we saw what happened. And he walked down Zhu Khan when he earned that lesser WBA belt. And obviously when he fought the fight of the year in 2022 against Michael Conlon. One of the best fights I've ever seen. That fight was so fantastic. And yeah, Lee Wood is always going to have our respect for that. It's one of those things that, you could make a movie off of a fight like that. Let's see. DJ said Teofimo Lopez versus Alexis Rocha at 147. Did they? I hope they didn't announce that. Not that I don't like Alexis Rocha. I mean, he did get, slaughtered in that one fight against, I can hardly remember that guy's name. Help me out with the guy who just knocked out Alexis Rocha. Rocha's had one fight since. Giovanni Santillan. I think it's Giovanni Santillan. But Giovanni Santillan then fought Brian Norman, and that was a great fight. And Brian Norman ended up stopping Santillan. So again, when a guy has like a big moment, don't be surprised when he loses his very next fight, because they're just ebbs and flows to this boxing thing. Yeah, Vaquero Navarrete will have to skip tacos and regular sodas if he wants to make 130 again. But yeah, like you said, there is definitely, you could look around his torso area and see that there's a lot of room for him, to lose that weight. Remember how slim he looked at 122, and then he got 126 and then 130. Then his body type started changing. Let's see. But yeah, we're about to wrap this one up in a moment. By the way, I think that David Morrell is going to look really good in his next fight. Because again, it's ebbs and flows. There's always that one guy that the fighter with the buzz looks very unimpressive against, and then they continue looking spectacular as they rise to a title shot eventually. And by the way, what did you think about the pageantry and Turki Al-Sheikh being inducted into the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame? Yeah. Money could get you a lot. Not to say that he hasn't impacted the game. So look, even if it was merit-based, I guess you could make an argument for it. He's given us some fantastic fights already. And we're about to get Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois. We're about to get Artur Beterbiev versus Dimitri Bivol. My favorite fight on the whole boxing calendar for the rest of the year, for the entire year, is that one. And then at the end of the year, we're getting the rematch of Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury. So yeah, Riyadh season is real. I'm just keeping a close eye on how he's kind of throwing his weight around in the boxing space. But again, he's at a point where they've got the financial backing where he could wave a wand and all of a sudden 4 sanctioning bodies will disappear. I feel like we're at that point. I mean, we started getting news that he was like interested in what? Did I misread that? Buying Top Rank, buying Golden Boy? Like, they could call it co-promoting all they want, but he's essentially kind of buying the promotion, depending on the capacity that they work together and how it's done. But when you're coming in with all the investment, usually you're running the show and calling the shots. Yeah, Benji, Lee Wood deserves some of that oil money for sure. What's Turkey waiting on? Somebody needs to send Turkey the fight footage of Lee Wood versus Michael Conlan. I don't know if he's seen that one yet. Yeah, and a lot of those fights that he's making can't happen because the promoters don't have deep enough pockets to pay both fighters. And let's keep it real. These Riyadh season cards aren't making money. I don't know if they're like gaining more attraction or more tourist money in Saudi Arabia. I don't know how well that marketing is doing in terms of making that the new hub like they did with Dubai and Abu Dhabi. But in terms of the event itself in a vacuum, I'd imagine that it's like a financial bloodletting. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that it's turning a profit. So that's why you don't see Bob Arum right now making Beterbiev versus Bivol, you know? Benny Bronx is in the house. Benny Bronx. Yeah. Thank you for coming through. Berlanga is a plus 700. Yeah. You know, and I still ain't going to take that plus 700. Now look, stranger things have happened, but just the fact that he's a plus 700, just the fact, yeah, he does have a puncher chance and he's a big guy. Canelo's not a big guy, but just the fact that it's a plus 700 tells you the type of fights that Canelo's setting up right now. Whatever spin he wants to give us, usually odds don't lie. If you want to remember what the sentiment was and the idea and the perceptions were going into a fight, check what the betting odds were. Right? Because if it's like, oh no, that was a good fight, or it was a lopsided fight, you know, in terms of the matchup. Well, if it was that lopsided or if it was that even, then put some money on the guy. If you know better, right, then put some money on that guy if the betting odds don't know what they're talking about. But usually when you've got somebody a plus 700, there's a reason why. And again, we've seen stranger things happen. But yeah, if you believe in Berlanga's puncher's chance and you think that Canelo is on somewhat of a decline and could be made to work too hard, or if you think that Berlanga might have some success with the jab, because he has, I believe, been developing a pretty good jab. If you think that he's been developing his tools and that Canelo might get pushed back a bit and might have to work harder than he wants to, a plus 700 might not be a bad idea. Sal, you said Canelo's KO is what's favored more than Canelo via decision? That's interesting. That is. Jay Foreman said it would have to be at least a plus 1,400 to get me interested. Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to budge on the 700 quite, but if it expands to a 900, I might give it a close look. But yeah, we're about to wrap this one up, guys. I want to thank you guys once again for coming through. Oh, Pablo B's, thanks. So it was Giovanni Santillan. AR Let, thank you for coming through. Virgil, you said Virgil might suffer his first loss. I agree. Bohachuk looked really good against Brian Mendoza, but keep in mind, Mendoza was a short notice. Remember, that was a very late notice where he got the call to fight Bohachuk in that case. Because Bohachuk was already going to fight, but Bohachuk was preparing to fight Sebastian Fundora, who got the call to fight Tim Tszyu because Keith Thurman pulled out. So then Brian Mendoza basically came off the couch. Now, he must have been training to like make weight or to get close to making weight, but he wasn't about to fight, I don't believe. And so he was a late replacement. So maybe there's a reason why he started getting beaten up that badly, from like rounds 4 through 10. Maybe that's why. But Bohachuk, we know he could crack. We know he throws a lot of punches. And we know that Virgil Ortiz and Bohachuk have sparred like 50 to 60 rounds together. Virgil Ortiz said that in an interview. Benji said he wouldn't take Berlanga at a plus 1,500. Oh, man. Let's see. Pablo B said Canelo could hit the club the night before, have a whole bottle of Don Julio, and even then he would beat Berlanga. It's just a shame that that's the matchup that we're getting stuck with, I don't know if I'm buying that one, to be honest. I really don't know if I'm buying that one. Somebody asked me if I'm going to cover the fight, if I'm going to like do a preview. I don't know. I probably will, just because I don't want to let my biases and the way that I see the sport kind of cloud what I'm giving weight to. You know what I mean? Like if I could cover a Jake Paul fight, then I could cover Canelo versus Berlanga, But I'm not enthused by the fight. Betty Bronx, you said you're currently in Puerto Rico. And there's a lot of hate towards Berlanga and a lot of Canelo fanboys down here. Really? So, okay. And I know that there are different levels, just like with any ethnicity out here. There are different levels. Like I remember when the Mexican fans used to boo Oscar De La Hoya because he was more, he was more Chicano and Chavez was their guy. And Oscar couldn't, speak super fluent Spanish at the time. So a lot of fans gave him a hard time. I wonder if, Edgar Berlanga being like a New Yorker and not having as close a tie to, to his country of ancestry, if that plays into why he's kind of getting shaded a bit, or if it's because he's totally undeserving of getting a fight against Canelo. And here we are with him getting a fight against Canelo. I don't know too much about the inner workings there. You're saying, Benny Bronx, you said that they don't like a Brooklyn-born Boricua. Okay. Pablo B. Yeah. Oh yeah. Much love. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. But yeah, if you get a chance, check out the Virgil Ortiz versus Bohachuk preview tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to a Venado Lopez versus Angelo Leo. I might do a very short one to cover that one. But yeah, I'm definitely going to issue the Virgil Ortiz versus Bohachuk preview and prediction tomorrow morning. But yeah, thank you guys once again for coming through. David Colon said Canelo in 3. Thank you for coming through, David Colon, A.R. Lett, Benny Bronx, Julio, Pablo B, Jay Foreman, Benji Tucker. Heck yeah. Jay Foreman, DJ, Sal, QT, boxing fan, Karma Serene. Yeah, Edward Espinoza. Yeah, thank you guys. Ventru. Heck yeah. Enjoy the fights this weekend too. But yeah, much love and thanks as always. I'm Wood. Thanks for tuning in.